it's never too early to establish who that network is going to be for you, and who that, because what I do find sometimes with this generation is they sometimes might find that a little bit off-putting, or they find it like they're imposing on someone and they don't want to be beholden to that. And the reality is, this is what makes the world go round. Mm-hmm. No matter what career you choose, no matter what path you choose, our world rides on the tires of relationships.
Yeah. Welcome to a new edition of City on a Hill. I'm your host, Whitney Mendoza, and today I'm joined by Ash Merchant. He is founder and CEO of Lionheart Partners. Welcome, Ash.
Good morning.
So glad to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Best Wednesday ever. It's a really good pep for the middle of the week.
Indeed.
So I'm going to let you kick us off. I've teased a little bit in the show that we're going to talk about leadership in 2023, the correlation between relationships and results, and you are the expert on this, so I know there's going to be so many amazing places we're going to go with it.
We're going to have fun.
We are. So tell everyone a little bit about your background and what you do.
Sure. So thank you, Whitney, and I appreciate being here this morning. And I have lived in Atlanta for over 40 years, and I'm not a native. I married a native.
Yeah.
We moved down here from upstate New York back in 1980 and have been here ever since. Grew up in Marietta and went to school at Georgia, and go Dogs, back to back, and did my MBA at Emory as well. So really my background is I'm a husband, I'm a dad to two young men, one 18, one 10, and just having a ball living in Johns Creek and Alpharetta area. My professional background is I've spent most of my career in the world of professional services, so everything from recruiting and talent acquisition to HR, benefits consulting, eventually risk management. And now, I'm in year 4 of Lionheart Partners, which is my own firm, and we specialize in leadership development and executive coaching and business advisory work.
Yeah.
So just having a great time doing it. I'm 50-something years old, and I'm part of the gig economy now.
Nice, yes. Well, how did you make that shift to leadership? Because I know being a parent will certainly do that for you. But what made you decide, okay, I've got these skills, I've kind of learned these lessons, and now I want to invest in other leaders? Because I feel like as executives ourselves, we can get too close to the problem, right, where we can't see actually what the solution is.
Certainly. It's interesting, after spending over 2 decades in a corporate career, I had a chance to step away from that career for about a year, and we did a mid-career gap year, or sabbatical, I guess. And when we got back from the sabbatical, I had a chance to sit down with a friend of ours, actually a mutual friend of ours, who just asked me a lot of questions about, hey, so what do you want to do next? Because I knew that going back into the corporate world was an option, but I wanted to try something new. And to his credit, he was just asking me a lot of questions about, hey, tell me about the work that you've done across your corporate career. And it turned out that all roads were leading back to, I've been in leadership development all of my career. I've been in executive coaching all of my career, and just business advisory. And his push and his nudge for me was, hey, well, what if you did that on your own and still serve the marketplace doing that, and still tap into some of the skill sets that you have that you're strong in? And I thought, well, it was almost like imposter syndrome took over at that point, because I got tangled up with, well, those people are, they have certifications and they've got other qualifications and all that. And he just sort of shook his head. He's like, no. He said, you've got just as much game as they do, but you've been doing it for somebody else for all of your career. Why not try it out on your own? And to his credit, really kind of helped launch Lionheart Partners, really to have a focus and an anchor around those 2 areas of leader development and coaching.
Yeah. I definitely want to get into the relationship and the results piece.
Sure.
Because, again, just how speaking of the gig economy, everything has changed and continues to change. I feel like many of us are still moving through our day decisions the way we interact with others at the speed of lightning. And others, I feel like, have really grasped this, need to slow down and appreciate people. A lot of the articles, I feel like maybe 12 months ago, everything was about the Great Resignation. A lot of the things that I'm reading now are about protecting, investing in the people who have stayed, who have shown that loyalty to your company, and investing in those individuals, because essentially they almost become like your brand ambassadors.
Certainly.
In the office.
Certainly.
So let's I into that, because I feel I was going to ask, what's the number one problem that you see leaders facing? But I would wager that's probably one of your answers.
Well, it's probably near top of the heap right now, because you've got what's been interesting over the last 24 months is coming out of pandemic conditions, you had certain parts of the economy that are still white hot when it comes to recruiting and finding talent. And I would argue that even today, at an unemployment rate that's under 4% in nationally and in most places, that's still a low number. Even in the midst of us hearing about Amazon, PayPal, Intel, some of these other organizations that are just going through a regular and natural cycle of business. But unfortunately, what's hitting the news right now is thousands and thousands of people are getting laid off. The reality is there are still some markets and some industries that are still desperately trying to find great talent. And the companies that I work with, one of the biggest worries that they have is, tall trees attract a lot of wind. And when that happens, our people are always going to be at risk for getting poached by a competitor, getting poached for another opportunity. So how do we put our arms around them? How do we put a bear hug around them? Whether it's through financial means, or whether it's through just creating an employee experience that's so compelling that makes people think twice before jumping ship, even if it is for more money.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Because I know that there's still the shift that we're trying to figure out as well, working from home versus working from the office. And each company, as we continue to move into the future, has designed their own program around that, if you will. Some have said, okay, everybody come back. Some have got this half and half deal going on. Others just let their employees choose. So where do you see that shape shifting?
Yeah, it's a big challenge for companies right now. And the push is, how do we make our environment in the office irresistibly intentional, so that where people are looking forward to, the answer of 5 days a week back in the office, 8 to 5 or whatever the traditional work schedule is, I do think that we're at a bit of a conundrum now on that, because that's not the right answer.
Yep, I agree.
Now, fully remote, unless that's what your company culture was pre-pandemic, I'm not sure that's the right answer either. So there's a lot of tension right now of, okay, if we're going to require people to come back to work X number of days per week, are we going to make it so compelling for them and so just irresistible for them, so that the commute that they have to have coming in, or the childcare decisions that they have to make, are going to be, that trade is going to be worth me having to go back into work for a little bit. So just pushing companies to think about, are we making it irresistible for people to want to come back in? Are we creating value in those days, whether it's cross collaboration, whether it's the term that I use with my clients is, are we creating this atmosphere of having a ministry of availability? And this is more geared towards senior leaders, where are they making themselves available to some of our mid-tier and junior colleagues around mentoring opportunities, around spending time with them, just, informal and perhaps formal structured time with our best employees and our highest potential employees, where they say, you know what? I'm not going to go work for somebody else, because I get time on the CEO's calendar twice a year, because he or she is in the ministry of availability and they've opened their door up to me, and given me access and time to spend time with them.
And how do you see the companies doing that do have so many remote workers now? Again, right? Because we have that ability. So the pool has also opened up. How do we continue to keep those people involved?
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I think the reality is that there is going to be a portion of the population that is remote and won't necessarily have the in-person or in-office opportunities. Where Ministry of Availability gets extended to them is around this idea of just even having access. Even if it is a Zoom call or a Teams call or anything like that, are we including them? There's a big push that's happening right now, and it's coming out in engagement surveys and employee satisfaction surveys about this concept of belonging. Do I feel like I belong here at this organization? And part of that belonging is not just through affinity and through saying, hey, there's people around here that look like me or perhaps sound like me, but it's do I feel like I belong here by how people treat me and how the environment and the atmosphere is created around company culture and different things like that. Having a sense of belonging doesn't mean that you have to be necessarily in the office. It just means when I wake up in the day, and if I'm a remote employee, I am still so proud of the organization that I represent because I believe in their mission, I believe in their vision, I buy into the leadership that's running the company, and that gets extended to them through access and relationships.
Yeah. Funny, I was just working on some social media and a President's Day we have coming up, and it was a Dwight Eisenhower quote, which is essentially was motivation is inspiring others to do what you want them to do because they want to do it.
Certainly. No, it's a great quote.
How much do you think also on the side of the talent self-awareness plays into that? Because I'm also still hearing, it's funny because, we've worked in an office and we've worked from home before all of that was like cool, just, being business owners. But self-awareness, what is the role that plays? Because I even still hear, we've reached like, I've got to get out of the house because I keep doing laundry when I'm really supposed to be doing work because, you're there and you see that. So how does that play into as we're either looking for a job or in the role that we're in, and maybe we don't want to leave, but we just feel like maybe we're the cause of this disconnection that, we're basically feeding that feeling.
It's a great call out. So what I will say around self-awareness, and this is, I do believe we've lost our way a little bit as a business society, where when people wake up in the morning, as long as they are engaged with their employer and they are generally satisfied to be a part of whatever organization they're a part of, their number one priority throughout the day is to add value to that organization, whether that's through their individual effort, whether that's through their teams, whether that is through, if it's taking care of customers. I worked for a CEO years ago that talked about this idea of you have one of two jobs in this organization. You are either serving clients directly or you are serving someone who serves clients. You're in one of those two boats. Yep. And I thought it was just a very brilliant, it was a brilliant way to just articulate, let's not have any confusion about this. We come to work every day, and that is not code for we're a bunch of robots and we just need to blindly go about our day every day, but it is, do we come to work? And this is where your question about self-awareness comes in, is when I show up every day, whether that's how I show up remotely or how I show up in the office, does the work that I do add value? And do I look at it through the lens of, does everything I do add value to a person, to a teammate, to a client situation, to a technology, whatever business that we're in, am I adding value throughout the day versus, hey, we have 3 different kinds of water in our pantry or 4 different kinds of coffee machines throughout the office. I mean, all those things are good, and all those things contribute to a pleasant work atmosphere. At the end of the day, though, I've been hired by an organization so that I can provide value to that organization. And they saw something in me that allowed them to bring me in and add value to a customer or add value to the organization. Does that make sense?
It does. And I love that, because the analogy I had in my mind was like the basis of a band.
Yeah.
The basis of a band is secretly cool, right? Like nobody talks about him or her. They're typically in the back, in the corner. But if you didn't have that bassist, the front lead singer would sound completely different. Like all of those things, the drums, lead guitar, that all comes together to create this sound, which is the pitter patter that helps the singer sing. I mean, I've even worked with Isaac in speaking, where if I'm talking too fast and we're doing a presentation, and there's a word for it, so it's a cool technical term, but it's like that pace of, even though I'm in the background and you're in the front, I'm supporting you to do your job. So even if you're not like sales, but to your point, you're supporting someone who does that frontline work, your value is still through the roof. You need each of those pieces, and each of those individuals has to understand that in order to contribute to the company together.
You know, it's so beautifully put, and the thing that makes me think further about it is, I was listening to a podcast yesterday of a guy that I follow here in Atlanta. Great podcast.
Yeah.
And his guest was talking about this idea of everybody leads in an organization, whether you're in a leadership role or not. Everyone plays a role. You know, whether they lead themselves, whether they're a leader of self or a leader of a small team or a leader of a function or anything like that. I would extend that to everybody sells. You know, everybody sells and services in their organization, regardless of whether you're in a manufacturing business or a services business or a retail establishment. Everybody leads, everybody sells and serves. And so when we go about it with a mentality of, I go to work every day to serve somebody or something, whether it's a customer, a client, if I'm a part of a nonprofit, I'm serving the mission, I'm serving, you know, if I work for a church or a place of worship, then I'm serving that particular place. And I'm also responsible for leading myself through disciplined behaviors, through contribution, through self-awareness, through, depending on what level they are, perhaps that's executive presence. You know, I'm just responsible for showing that side of me in being a leader.
Yeah. That makes me think of another question, just with your history and experience in recruitment. How do you pick up during either the interview or just those first interactions to know that you're talking with someone that's going to take that servant leadership approach to the company?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it is, this one really requires some level of questioning for a candidate to be able to have them talk about failure, have them talk about adversity, have them talk about situations that are uncomfortable. I mean, you know, oftentimes when we're interviewing for a job, we tend to be very half glass, you know, glass half full people, or we tend to focus only on the positives. And then when somebody asks about, you know, tell me something that you struggle with or that you're weak in. Well, I work too hard. Well, that's nonsense. Complete nonsense when you answer it that way, because it doesn't really show a level of humility. But you know, versus
we think it does.
Let me tell you about a time where I just completely messed something up, and this is what happened, and this is how I bounced back from it. I mean, that answer, perhaps even phrased that way, shows two things. It shows humility, but it also shows resilience. We're hearing this term so much from CEOs right now, not just about business resilience, but how are our people demonstrating resilience in their job? I mean, this has not been an easy 36 months for us.
For any of us.
So this month, February 1st, we are at this, 3-year mark of when the pandemic, within a week of today, is when the whole world shut down 3 years ago. And it forced us to be personally resilient, but it also forced us to be professionally resilient. And so listening out for that and having, again, I know we've beat it up a little bit today, but back to your original comment about self-awareness, people that possess self-awareness usually will interview well because they're able to share their struggle in a very appropriate way, without shooting themselves in the foot for that job interview.
Right. Well, I think it's worth repeating to Ash, because this is, if you're listening and you haven't done that self-work to figure out what your skills are, how you provide, what you really want, can you work from home, or do you need to inspire yourself to go into the office every now and then? If you haven't done that at this point, it's time to get going.
It is, and what I like about really this idea of coming back into the office, and again, you can do this remotely, but there's definitely a distinct advantage of how you are showing up to others. I mean, we lived in the world for 3 years of Zoom calls and Teams calls and that, and there was just something sterile about that that didn't allow for reading the room. It didn't allow for reading body language and that. And again, some people are better at it than others, and they probably showed up okay, or if not good, online. But there's no substitute for what we're doing here. There really isn't.
Absolutely.
And I push. I was on a call yesterday with a potential client, and we were just talking about this idea of building social capital and building relational capital. That's hard to do remotely.
Yep.
It just
You're right.
It's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's just hard. And I encourage people as best they can to build up the value of that relational currency through face-to-face, through live interaction. I mean, I kid with my older son, Will, about the idea of taking it out of text or taking it outside of the group chat or outside of the Discord server, because there's nuances to conversation and relationship building that are lost when you're having to read it in short bursts of 140 characters or less. I mean, there's just so much room sometimes for misinterpretation,
100%,
or just not really getting the gist of what needs to be said with that. So just pushing on this idea of how do we get better at that? Because ultimately, we talk about this connection between relationships and results. Results are generated by people. And when there's an emphasis and there's an intentionality around developing better and stronger relationships, good results are going to come. They just are.
I feel like that's a mic drop moment, but I have 2 more questions for you. We could have ended it there, and that would have been worth the price of admission, but I have 2 more questions for you before I let you go.
Okay.
But I had to soak that one in a moment. Okay. I did want to ask you your advice for young leaders, because just kind of as we were talking about, I know you have 2 sons, but we were talking about your eldest, Will, that he's really going through this transition of out of high school and trying to decide what the next step is. And so we were talking about the fact that millennials, are we allowed, is that what they are? Millennials?
Actually, they're Gen Z. They're
Gen Zers?
Yeah.
I'm a millennial, but I'm on the I'm on the cool side.
You're on the
I'm on the 80s. I'm on the 80s side. So Gen Z, like we were discussing the fact that they have so many options that it really becomes analysis paralysis. And then they're like, well, I've got so many options. I don't know what to do, so I won't do anything. When, like you and I were saying, but you do have so many options. So pick one. And I think you said, like, if the wheels fall off, go get another car. Like, just make another decision. So what is your advice to the young leaders out there?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's funny. It's on the mind of Gen Z a lot right now, because there are a lot of options, and they don't want to make the wrong decision.
Yeah,
and I respect that. And at the same time, in the grand scheme of life, I look back at how many times I have fallen down and failed, and as long as failure of the same thing doesn't become a repeated pattern, I mean, that's a different conversation to have if you're failing all the time for the same reasons.
Very true.
But if failure is part of the journey And if you're able to pick up some nuggets of wisdom as a result of that failure, I'm all for it. I am absolutely all for it. And the advice I would give to Generation Z, or anybody for that matter, is you're at a point in your life where you can fail, and that's okay, as long as you're learning from it. The other piece that I push young folks on is the idea of building relationships, authentic relationships.
Yep.
And we've talked about this before, about this idea. I had a chance to speak to a group about a week and a half ago. This was a group of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors in high school.
Fun, okay.
All men. And we did an exercise with them. We did an exercise, actually, that I do with some of my clients around, okay, what does your relationship map look like? You know, who are your A relationships? Who are your B listers? Who are your C listers? And I gave them some parameters around each one, and I gave them all an index card and said, all right, draw three columns and start writing out your A list, your B list, and your C list.
Yeah.
So they were off to the races doing this exercise. And about 10 seconds into the exercise, I said, okay, stop for a minute. I should have clarified. I want these people to be over the age of 18. Because they were all writing their friends, you know. They were all,
that kind of hit me in the back of my mind. I was like,
They went all. They pivoted in a way that naturally they would have. So they're all writing out their things. So I stopped them, and there was just this audible groan across the room. And you know, I gotta, because there was a bit of frustration in that moment of, well, okay, wait a minute, who do I put on there? So my encouragement to people today is, you run across people in your normal course of life as a freshman, as a sophomore, junior, and a senior in high school, whether it's an athletic coach who can help connect you to a trainer, whether it's a guidance counselor that can help get you to your school of choice, or perhaps a trade opportunity or an employment opportunity. Your teachers have an interesting worldview of what their life experiences have been like. Your parents, your friends of your parents. There was one kid in this class, he was a junior, and I had to give him credit for this, because when we debriefed on the exercise, I said, all right, what did everybody learn? You know, what were the surprises?
Yeah.
And to his credit, he raised his hand and he said, well, 2 of my ex-girlfriend's moms showed up on the list. And I thought, that's awesome. That is great. That is exactly how you want to be thinking about this thing of, you know what, maybe things didn't work out in your relationship, but I didn't damage another one.
Right.
And they showed up on this kid's list, and I thought, that's a very interesting aha for us.
Well, he doesn't know that he's going to be applying for a job where they work, right? Yeah, it goes up and down the chain both ways.
It does. And what that told me was, and I don't think we do a good enough job of this, is when adversity happens, you have a choice of whether you're able to protect a relationship or you're going to damage a relationship.
Yeah.
And in this kid's case, I mean, again, we don't know all the backstory and details on it, but assuming he didn't burn a bridge on that relationship, he just has 2 people now in his corner that, you know, he obviously made a good enough impression that they were able to stay on his list. So again, it's a small example. I know we say it in jest a little bit, but just this idea of, it's never too early to establish who that network is going to be for you, and who that, because what I do find sometimes with this generation is they sometimes might find that a little bit off-putting, or they find it like they're imposing on someone and they don't want to be beholden to that. And the reality is, this is what makes the world go round. No matter what career you choose, no matter what path you choose, our world rides on the tires of relationships.
Yeah. That kind of reminded me of, you know, building relationships and then feeding into just make a decision and do the best you can.
Certainly.
Are you okay if I quote Gary Vaynerchuk? I was on a podcast.
As edgy as he is, he still has some pretty good nuggets.
I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I asked for permission to quote Mike Tyson. So Mike's got some interesting things that he says too. Some of them are actually pretty good. You're like, really? He said that? I saw a post by Gary a couple of days ago that was essentially everything is fixable. Like, pretty much anything is fixable.
Certainly.
There are things in life that can happen that you're like, can't go back. But I'd say 90% of the mistakes, and again, hitting a brick wall, turn around, go try the other route. It's fixable.
It is funny. The closing comment that I made to this group of students was, be fiercely protective of your brand and how you show up. I mean, this is as much as I love social media, and I know we for our respective businesses, we use it quite a bit. Having just a hawkish presence around your personal brand, because once it's out there, it's out there.
Right.
And right, wrong, or indifferent, people are going to make judgment calls on what they see about you. So just fiercely protect that.
So true.
In how you communicate and how you show up.
Yeah. For my last question, Ash knew this was coming. My question I ask every guest, and I'm excited to hear your answer. What does it mean to you to be that shining, standout city on a hill?
I love the imagery, and I was so excited coming here today because I thought this is such a cool name of a podcast. I was telling Beth and Will last night about the name of your podcast, and I thought I love the imagery of that, because what I think about is a city on a hill is just that, where when people need hope and they need confidence and they need to be inspired, they look to the city on the hill. This is what America has been for the rest of the world for many years and continues to be, I believe. And as people in the marketplace, I view my role as at least trying to be that city on the hill where people can look at me and experience me and look at it and say, wow, there's just something different about that guy. There's just something that either inspires us about how he carries himself, or it gives us hope, or it gives us just a positive outlook on all the craziness that's happening in the world right now. City on the Hill cannot be broken, and City on the Hill just is unshaken, whether it's raining outside or whether it is sunny and 70 outside. So that's what I think about when I think about City on the Hill.
That was a beautiful answer. And all those after you, this is the standard. This is the standard for the answer I'm looking for, okay? Just so you know.
Yikes.
No, I think that was beautifully said. And if I could put a bow on the thought process behind, because of course, I wanted to correlate with Fifth City, but as individuals, we are constantly leading, we are constantly selling, and so there are standout leaders, there are standout salesmen. Anything that you do, back to the age-old, if you're the janitor, sweep the floor better than anybody's ever swept it.
Yes.
That's 100% what that means. So
I'm with you. Amen.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Okay, Ash, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Sure. My LinkedIn handle, you can just find me on LinkedIn, Ash Merchant. My website is lionheart.partners. I'm active on Facebook as well.
Awesome.
So haven't veered off into much else in terms of, I do Instagram for fun and family. So that's how you can find me.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
We'll see you next time.
All right.